like, what is it? ECE, is that what it is? Before Common Era, then ACE or after Common Era, right? It doesn't make any sense, right? Because say basically the Common Era is now 2050, right? But Paul wrote this about 3 months when he was in Corinth, right? So when he was staying there, this is approximately when he wrote Romans, and then it was written to the Romans and the believers in Rome, the Jews and the Gentiles. That's one of the unique things about Paul, is he was focusing not just on the Jews, but the Gentiles. And that's where a rift happened between the apostles, original 12, right, and Paul. Because they're like, no, this is for the Jews. Jesus came for us. He's our Savior, not the rest of the world. Paul's like, no. He's the Savior of the world. But this message is for everyone. And there was a struggle there for a while. They were in conflict. Paul went out and he wrote how many books in the New Testament? How many books are in the New Testament? 6 total, right? 27 in the New Testament, right? Paul wrote over half, right half, right? And he's probably one of the greatest apostles, the greatest evangelists, within just the history of the Scripture. He reached a lot of people. That was his objective. Like, no, everybody here needs to hear the gospel message. Everybody is God's creation. Everybody is worthy of being saved. That's what he concentrated on. Everybody, Gentiles and Jews. It's not just chosen people, right? He wanted to unify the Jewish and the Gentile believers in Rome. And after not really, it went on for hundreds of years afterwards, the persecution, even during when Rome became Christian, right? The rift with one of the main reasons they moved to Sunday is they were already worshiping God on Sunday, their God, right? The sun God. That was one of the things. The other area was the Christians wanted to be separated from the Jews because they were being persecuted. They want to make sure, hey, we're not with that group. Now, whether you want to argue whether we can or can't have a Sunday service, I actually had a long time, I had a conflict with that, And when you're reading the scriptures, Paul talks about, hey, one day somebody looks at the day as special, other people look at every day. Don't make them stumble. The main thing is, are we worshiping God? Also, throughout the scriptures, it talks about how the apostles gathered on the first day of the week to worship God. Right? So, we're worshiping God. But he wrote to the Gentiles and the Jews in Rome. He wanted to unify them through the grace of God. To provide a theological foundation of salvation by faith, right? Not by works, but by faith in Jesus Christ, to prepare the Roman church for Paul's planned missionary journey to Spain and to clarify righteousness, God revealed in Christ. A major issue here, what Paul talks about right out the gate, okay, is sin. Man has a problem with sin. What was it? Just the other day I was thinking of something. I was thinking, you just can't get away from your sinful thoughts, right? When you're looking at like, oh, I'm following Christ. I don't know, does anybody ever have this struggle? Anybody ever have these thoughts or anything? I don't know, maybe you can agree or disagree with me. But it's like, when I'm thinking, okay, if this turns out this way, I can get angry at God and blame it on God, right? Okay, I had this thought probably in the last couple of days, right? This is the reason why. We had court for Gabriel, which we told to us that it was changed, right? It was on the 27th of this month, right? We were in Hawaii, so we were going to on Zoom. We were told that it got changed because they weren't able to get a hold of the bio parents in time for that court date, so they changed it to September so the bio parents could show up. We're like, okay, I guess we don't have court. Well, we did have court, right? So, and then the bio parents showed up. Right. Now, I don't know to me it's good news. Might be bad news. I don't know, but the bio mom, left early. I was thinking she's probably jizzing and needed to get a hit or something. At least this is my brain, right? And she left early. We didn't get to go to the court. We didn't get to participate in it, but the
so before he was even one, they seen him twice, and since then they haven't seen him. But now the courts are like, hey, the parents are back in the picture. So then I'm thinking in my head, this happens, and he goes back, why would God do this? And I'm getting mad at God, right? Then I'm thinking, I can get mad at God, and then I'll go do what I want to do. And then I was thinking, while I'm doing this thought process, I don't know if you guys ever have these things in your head, maybe it's just weird. But I'm thinking, is that what you go through? You want to get mad at God so now I can live a sinful life and blame it on him? And that's just literally my thought, right? Thinking, I could go back and be free and satisfy my flesh, right? It wasn't exactly like that, but that's basically the ultimate thoughts in my brain. And then I started wondering if that's what that's ultimately the objective. Get mad at God, so now I can go satisfy myself. Right? And then, of course, when you satisfy yourself, you're tied to the sinful nature. And it doesn't go well for us. I mean, this person was doing drugs, and they were talking to somebody who knew this is it wasn't a third account. I'm talking to this person. Their wife's mad at them because he's talking to a female about this other person doing drugs, and there's a close relationship. They're family members, right? And this person's been a long-time family member of the family. Trying to be somewhat ambiguous here. So you guys tracking so far? Yeah. All right. Anyway, so they're mad. So this person shares the details with me, maybe thinking I can go back and tell the wife, hey, you don't have a right to be mad yet because it's about this relative that he's trying to figure out what's going on, right? So now I've lost my whole story. But anyways, the main topic here was they were talking, this female person's talking to this other relative, which is a male, and he's blaming his girlfriend on doing drugs. This person's like, no, you know this guy's a druggie. You've known him for a long time. You see people in your industry that you used to work in doing drugs all the time. It's not that person's fault. It's your fault. You should have known better, right? And realistically, that's the whole thing when it comes to sin. We should know better. Have you ever heard of omission and what's the other one? Omission, right? One's done on purpose and one's done on accident, where you don't know about it. I sinned, but I didn't know I sinned. In fact, I don't know I'm still in sin. Someone asked for forgiveness just in case. You guys ever done that before? Right? Because that's what I heard. Just, right? Clearly, that is what I heard. All right? You'd ask for forgiveness for the sins that you know about, and then you ask for forgiveness for the sins you don't know about that you committed. Okay? That makes sense. However, I don't know how that can be possible. I have the Holy Spirit that lives in me. And every time I've sinned, even if it wasn't on purpose, which probably is rarely, right? Usually I get to battle my own brain before I sin, right? So, but rarely I sin on accident. And usually it's impulsive if it is, right? Immediately I get the Holy Spirit going, time out. You're wrong, right? That's when we've got Christ in us. I mean, you got to remember, Paul's writing to believers or so-called believers throughout this time. Like, hey, you guys should know better, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But humans have a sinful nature that just by nature we're selfish, right? I've had this debate before. Most people, once they understand what I'm saying, they stop debating. I've only had one time where someone really debated with me on this. I was like, well, I really wasn't wanting to debate over conversation. But I can narrow sin down to one thing. That's selfishness. I lie because I don't want to be exposed. I'm being selfish for myself, right? I steal because I want something for myself. I lust because I want my own self. Everything is about you when you're sinning. When you're in a righteous mode with Christ, it's no longer about you. It's about the love that he's given so you can share it with others. The one directs towards you, your nature. The other one directs Christ. Does that make sense? Enthusiastic today. All right? Thank you. All right. For all have sinned. You know, Paul's right at the beginning. He's talking about, you guys are all worthless people. You're all sinners. Right? We're all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And are justified by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. So we're redeemed through him even though we're still sinners. Let's go back to the beginning So if God's wrath against human sin, what does that mean then? You've not been washed clean. You're still operating on your own accord. You're not doing it with Christ, you're doing it on your own. And if you're doing it on your own, you're in cahoots with the devil. Right? Now, do most people run around operating with partnership with the devil? No. Right? Not literally. But if you're not with Christ, you're what? You're against him. Satan much rather you work all on your own so he doesn't have to bother you. He's like, yeah, they're on their own. I think it's, I want to say it's funny, but it's definitely unique when you step out of your own comfort zone and you say, I want to do this for God. All of a sudden, Satan reacts in a manner that wants to stop you. He wants to discourage you. I've seen it on both. I've counseled in both cases, but I've seen it where the person was like going against, and I guess, where does it talk about in Scripture when you go through struggles? If you love God, it'll be for His glory, right? You guys know what I'm talking about? All right? So, when Teresa and I, in December of 2010, we said yes to God, from that moment until about 2013-ish, 14, right around there, it's about 3 years, almost, in that time frame, we went through hell. Everything that could go wrong seemed to go wrong, right? And I think at that moment, Satan, in my opinion, lost his mind. It's like, oh no, this guy was being fine. I mean, they went to church once in a while. Okay, they went to church on Sundays, but really weren't connected, because we lived in Bonnie Lake, and, we got home late, didn't really, have a lot of time to participate in the kingdom, and now all of a sudden we're going to go be, leaders within the kingdom. He loses his mind, right? That's my analogy. That's what I thought, all right? I still think that. I've had 2 cases where I've seen where they stepped out. One says, okay, I want to do this for the Lord, right? And same thing happened to them. And I coached them and said, look, you got to stick it out. You got to pray. You got to keep focused on the Lord. It will pass, and then you'll be able to help somebody in the future, right? I didn't say way I'm doing it with you right now. That's what I said. So they stuck it out. Actually, in this particular case, they're still going through it, but they've been going through it for a little while, and you can see things are getting better. The other person that we talked to pretty much gave up quickly. See, they're never going to have the opportunity to do what God intended for them. Does that make sense? Now, if God knows the future, He already knew that person was going to say no, but it doesn't mean that He doesn't give up on us from our perspective. You guys ought to understand that. Just because God knows the future doesn't mean that that future is determined because God knows the future. Does that make sense to everybody? It's kind of hard to wrap your mind around it. Am I the only one that... Just because God knows the future doesn't mean the outcome is predetermined from my perspective. Does that make sense? Okay, that's why it's... All right. It was easy for me when someone explained this to me, it was easy for me to understand. Okay, the reason for that is because in the military, I'd set up scenarios. So let's say there's bad guys in this building. You guys are all outside. You're going to make a plan. And I already set it up that you guys are going to lose. I was probably right 90-some% of the time. Once in a while, you'd surprise me, and then they would win. That makes sense. So I knew I could establish a plan and set you up, and I already knew the future, pretty much what was going to happen. I knew exactly how you were going to respond to everything I set up, and by the most part, it was almost always done. And I'm not God. So it's relatively easy for me to understand that this group of people, even though I did predetermine the outcome, still made their own choices. Does that make sense to everybody? So God, just because He knows the outcome, He still allows us to make the choices of that outcome. Does that make sense? See? Okay. All right. So, when we look at, okay, I've talked about this before. I think my best example that I can relate this to in the scriptures, there's more than a few. That's one I can relate to, is when Moses is talking to God, and God's wanting to annihilate everybody because they become sinful and made a statue, right? And Moses says, no, don't do that, right? And then it says God Moses felt after that happened? Uplifted, right? God knows our name. He created us. He knows how we respond to things. So, when we went to Hawaii on Saturday, we landed. Sunday morning, we're trying to find a church. And we're determined, we're like, okay, let's go to this one church. His name is Pastor Charles. We met him a couple years ago. He's a Hawaiian guy. We're going to go to his church. But I wasn't positive how to get there. It's like literally out in the middle of nowhere, right? And we're like, okay, we go to church. You know, we always go to church. We're, you know, Teresa and I were debating whether we should go to church. Finally, we'll go to this one church. So we go to the church. And then afterwards, I felt better, right? When you're in communion with God, you feel better. All right? So if you're at home going, should I go to church or should I not go to church, right? He wants us to gather together. The answer is you should go. You're going to feel better. All right? So I felt better after we're all done. I was glad I went. I know when I pray and God answers my prayer, it encourages me to continue to anticipate positive responses, positive outcomes with my participation in the kingdom of God. That's why God does these things. Encourage you. And if he does do something that makes you stumble, right? In other words, he tests us, right? He tests us? He doesn't tempt us, but he does test us, right? Why? Because the outcome of that may be better or may be stronger. And it'll at some point help you, other people. When they, like my case, they get called, I was able to share my experience of what happened to me to encourage them to continue on what God asked them to do as opposed to quitting. Right? The other persons, they decided to quit pretty quickly in the process. Kind of on them. Doesn't mean that God has given up on them. Right? God doesn't give up on you. Do you think the person, I know I'm getting off track here, but when we're talking about our sinful nature, you're like, okay, you guys know Ozzy Osbourne, right? I think everybody heard that he just passed away, right? The part that I didn't understand was Teresa did not know until just like 2 days ago that he was the Prince of Darkness, what they called him, right? Because I was doing, I was like, what are you talking about? How did you not know this, right? It's because I was doing a video and I had a background song. So you can't play that. That's the Prince of Darkness. It's like, this is an Ozzy Osbourne song. It's not even a Black Sabbath song. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's the Prince of Darkness. I'm like, oh my gosh, you just figured this out. All right. Anyways, I don't believe God gave up on Ozzy Osbourne. Okay? So in other words, we can give up on God, but God doesn't give up on us. We could be the thief on the cross, and our last dying breath, we could say yes. I don't want to anticipate her doing that, right? I don't want to take that chance.
Alice Cooper got saved. So, God, he got saved.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So there you go. Alice Cooper, do you guys know who he is?
Yes.
He is worse than Ozzy Osbourne, right? All right? But I don't think God gives up on us. We give up on him. And I think sometimes our hearts get so hardened that even in the end, we're still like, no, I'm not going to participate in this so-called kingdom, whatever thing. I don't know what they is. But that's our sinful nature. And God's wrath towards our sin is what we ask for. It's not because he wants to send us. Who sends you to hell? Is it God? No, it's you. You said no to God. You said no to the Creator. Right? For the wrath of God is revealed from the heavens against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. God's holy opposition to sin is active and righteous. It's not impulsive, and it's not rage. God doesn't come out. I was looking at the pictures in a different one. I always try to put pictures up there. And I was looking for some pictures, man, and it's just like God, just this angry look, this fear, almost like a monster look, right? Like against sin. I was looking at like God opposes sin, God's wrath against sin, and all the Google pictures were showing on that. And I was thinking in my head, that isn't what God looks like when he opposes sin. I think God, I mean, he doesn't like it, but he still looks holy and righteous. since Ozzy Osbourne has passed, there's a lot of videos of him and other, they show some other rock stars. And they were showing the guy from Metallica, I don't know his name, the singer from Metallica. And they're showing a picture of him and he's all happy. I'm thinking, he's received his reward. This is what he sought after, what he wanted, was fame and fortune here, right? Rather than having eternal life. I don't think anybody's going to have fame and fortune in heaven, at least not the way we would see it, right? We can have fortune, maybe fame, I guess, but it would be totally different. It would be beyond my understanding, right? It's not what we would think, right? And I don't think it's, in other words, what we perceive as fame, fortune, holy, righteousness, good, love, whatever it is, whatever attribute that we might put as positive here is still going to be different in heaven. So when I say I have love, right? The love that I have in heaven, I think is going to be so much greater that I can't even comprehend it. Does that make sense? I mean, it's like today, this is a red flag to me. I don't know. I'll use you, Will, right? Me and Will's known each other for a week, and Will's my pastor, and I said, Will, I love you. That's a red flag to me. As soon as somebody tells me that they love me, they've only known me for a week, I'm like, yeah, you're going to be against me at some point. You're going to be saying something bad about me, right? I mean, if you can throw love out that easy, you can throw out hate that easy, right? Yeah. So, and then I'm going to say, me and Teresa, we pretty much have gotten, we've been right. I don't want to say 100% time, but I've definitely been right a lot more than I've been wrong. So I'm going, okay. But anyways, for although they knew God, see, this is one of the things that this verse here, right, when we're talking about this in 23, they knew God. I personally do believe that everybody, despite where you're from, despite your culture, knows who God is. Because God reveals himself to everybody. Now, our understanding of Jesus Christ and the role that he has might look different to me than it does to some Amazon tribe that's never been introduced to Jesus Christ. But I do believe that they know who God is. I think that's been evident from that tribe that was found in whatever 2010 in the Amazonian jungle, right? That's a whole other how you want to talk about it. Everybody, the Middle East, right? Everybody, this is what drives me crazy. One, it was funny, I was watching this video, and this guy was talking about how God is a particular skin color, right? And then this other person says, that doesn't make any sense. Why would God, in a spirit, have a skin color? The other person, well, God, we're made in his image. Of course he's going to have a skin color, and he looks like us. And that person's like, God made trees, and he doesn't look like a tree. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right? When we look at where Christ originated, right, in the Middle East, right? You say, oh, then he must be Arab, right? That's not the important part of it. It could have been in the Americas and originated here. That doesn't matter. God just happens to know probably where it was going to reach the most people at that particular time, so it can end up being where we're at, right? But God has started in the Middle East and has gone all the way around the entire even though humanity knows God, at some level, they reject him because of their own selfishness. Right? It is about me. This one here is claiming to be wise and they become fools. And they exchange the glory, the immortal God, for images resembling mortal man, birds, mammals. Doesn't matter. We're going to replace God with something. Atheists, well, there is no God. But they're worshiping something. Their atheism. So in essence, it becomes a God. Does that make sense to everybody? They're worshiping that there is no God, but yet they spend a lot of time fighting about that there is no God, right? That part doesn't make sense to me. But they are worshiping something. We're made to worship. So you're either going to worship him or you're going to figure out something else to worship. Whatever that might be, right? And God gave them over to what? Right? He says, look, if you don't want to follow me, you can do what you want. I'll let you. So if you ever wonder, wow, and so far this has been working. All right, I got a little video explaining this. All right. Video's over already. What the heck happened there? It's not supposed to work that way. All right, let's get the video. Whatever reason. All right, there we go. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Just learn from it. Basically, your right-handed mind is basically you're going to do what you want to do, and you're going to reject God. Does that make sense? What do you guys find pleasure in? I can tell you right now, if you guys thought hard enough, all right, and selfish enough, you could figure out something that you would like to do or have, you might compromise your faith. Now, being a Christian, right, the dilemma that we have is I shouldn't do that, right? So you're already now even maybe arguing with yourself and being mad at me, right? Why would I want to do that, right? But if you guys go to your deep south, there are times where we get along and we're thinking of something, right? Big Mac, whatever it is, I don't know what your desire is. And you're going to start compromising. Okay? If you ever worked with people who have done drugs, have been addicted to drugs, or if you've ever faced your situation yourself, right? And then you want to quit. And then let's say you do quit, right? At least for an extended period of time. Now, literally, this can be a few hours for some people, and it can be years for others, okay? But it's a process to take. But when you stumble back into your addiction, this is what happens first, right? Start to fight with yourself. I'm out. No, right? But see, Satan, I believe, whispers in your ear, right? If you're a Christian, he's whispering in your ear. If you're a non-Christian, he can do all kinds of different things, okay? But he's whispering in your ear. If Gabriel goes back, told everybody that God gave you this gift. Look what he's done for you, and then he's going to put that boy back into that family. He's going to end up being the same as them. That's not a good. How could that be a righteous God, right? So you start arguing in your own head. Right? You start creating justification to sin. Right? Then the next thing you do is you start to compromise. All right, I'll just this one time. Right? Or you'll tempt yourself. Right? If it's lust, you might accidentally type in something in your computer, or your phone now probably, accidentally, oh, I didn't mean to have that open up. If it's drugs, right, literally this happened to me, not me personally, but I was driving somebody, and they're like, oh, turn here. I'm like, but we're going over here. No, turn here. Why? And then they confess they want to drive by their drug house, right, where they got their drugs from, and they were already struggling. So they're tempting themselves, right? Well, I can be strong. I can drive by the drug dealer's house, whatever, right? They said drug house, I don't know what that means to any of y'all, all right? But they wanted to drive by their drug house, right? I can be strong and make it by there. No, you wanted to see if they were there, right? And then you start to compromise, and eventually you fall into sin, right? Your battlefield of the mind, right? Whether you like Joyce Myers or not, that book is right. It is a battlefield of the mind before you fall. Okay? Pride of self-righteousness. All right? I would say the religious world has this problem the same way back when the Pharisees had that problem, right? I am good. I am righteous. Look at me. Look how well I'm dressed, right? You guys like my shirt? In Gabriel, we went to, for Teresa and I anniversary, we went to a luau this year. Actually, we got to a lot of luau's, and it's kind of like, I don't know if I want to go down, but this one was actually pretty good. I liked it. Not pretty good, it was good. And then they served Hawaiian food. Imagine that, right? The last one we went to, they didn't have Hawaiian food. They didn't have poi at the last one. I was so mad. Right? You guys know what poi is? Good. Probably don't. All right. It's a root that they have, has zero flavor, but it is purple. All right? But anyways, so I bought this shirt. Well, they have the same one in Gabriel's size. I didn't want to spend that much money for a shirt that he's going to outgrow in 2 months. But so they were going to come today. So I wore this, and they're going to have the same shirt on. That's great. Shirts. Self-righteousness. This is in chapter 2 now. Just finished chapter 1. Right? Paul's basically telling you, look, you guys are a bunch of sinners. Right? Now he's going in there and saying, you guys are the righteous people. You're no better. You're running around acting like you're all righteous. You're hovering above the ground, floating. Right? No. You're no better than those guys. Right? What's the difference between a Christian sinner and a non-Christian sinner? Actually, I would say there's a lot of differences. Okay? So one over here, at least they admit that they're what they're doing, right? They enjoy what they're doing. Where we're saying, I'm not. No, right? Then we go behind closed doors and do it anyway. Right? Moses, right? He lifted up his hands and struck the rock, right? He was mad at God. He lost his temper. So here God punishes him and says, look, fine. You ain't even going to be able to go into the promised land. You're going to just be able to look at it from afar. Right? Our actions do matter with God. What we do and what we fail to do matters. Right? I've talked about this. Either whatever you do either brings you closer to God or takes you further away from God. To me, it's that simple. Maybe I got a simple mind, but I've narrowed everything down to 2 options, right? Either if I'm praying, I'm getting closer to God. If I'm not praying, I'm not getting closer to God. If I'm reading the scriptures, I'm getting closer to God. If I'm not reading the scriptures, I'm getting further away from God. If I'm talking like a righteous, holy man, then I'm getting closer to God. If I'm not talking, I'm swearing and telling bad jokes, then I'm not getting closer to God. It's relatively simple to me. Doesn't mean I'm always got it right. But my brain gets to say, look, either do this, and then when I get closer to God, I feel better. I just do. I think we all do. Or do you presume on the riches of the kindness and forbearance, patience, not knowing that God's We've been there before, it's fine, it's a big church, kind of like fit in the mix, right? Nobody notices it. All right? But the second one, literally their church, it's called the Surfing Church. Back in the 1800s, there was a tsunami came through. He survived the tsunami, by the way, in case you guys wonder, right? All right? Tsunami came through, and there was a schoolhouse with, I don't know how many kids, I want to say there was 50 children, right? And then teachers and stuff. The tsunami came through and wiped out the whole village down there. So they went down to pick up the bodies, and all the kids and the teachers went into the church, and the church got lifted up by the tsunami and floated in like 100 feet, got set back down, and nobody died. That's the church we went to. Actually, that's where Pastor Charles is. He's the Hawaiian guy. I know Charles is probably not his real name. All right, but that's where he's at. So I want you guys to keep him in your prayers because he's got a brain tumor. Okay, so we didn't get to see him when we were over. But we went to church there. And it's a small little church. It's probably, I don't even think it's this big. I mean, literally, it's just a teeny little church. Now, they have about the same congregation size that we would, at least when we went there, but over half of them sang, played instruments, which was not happening here. All right? All right. But the wrath of God, God's judgment, all right, is revealed at the end when the decision is made to either accept him or you didn't. Right? You're either going to heaven or you're going to hell. And it's up to you which way do you want to go. Right? The hardened heart. Even Gentiles show the laws written on their hearts. Gentiles may not have the law, but they're conscious of the law. You think about it, there's very few times in history where there hasn't been some type of structure that could represent God in somehow. The only time I would say it doesn't represent God in somehow is when they become so powerful, they become leaders of their own country, like the Saddam Hussein and his kids or a Hitler, right? But the rest of the world we still know, right? There's still a conscience there. We still like, this doesn't seem right. All right, I'll give you a real life example that you might be able to relate to. All right, so if you go to the Mexican mafia guys, the gangster kids, right? And I'm going to say I believe this to be true. It was thought, it was like, maybe it should be this way. Wonder if it's this way. And I finally got to talk to two guys that were in jail, and they were OGs. They were like 35 and 36 years old. And I asked them, when you guys get recruited, you're like 9, right? I mean, maybe at your time you were 12 and 13. Now they're going down to around 9. No dad living at home. You guys really don't know better. And you look at the gangster lifestyle as something positive. I said, yes. I said, so at what age do you realize what you're doing is not right? And then in the conversation I said about 21 to 24. They said, yes. But now it's too late. They can't get out. Right? So you got to remember, even this lifestyle that they got led into, right? And some were born into it literally. In other words, their parents are gangsters. Now they're gangsters, right? They're taught that this is right. Right? Your friend just got wronged, so therefore I'm going to go shoot these guys up, right? Does that make sense? Okay? And they don't look at it as wrong at all when they're young, when they're kids. And you're easily persuaded. But at some point, it changes, shifts in their spirit and goes, yeah, this is probably wrong, but I'm going to do it anyway. Right? I don't know at what point, maybe some leaders way up, rulers of their own countries have become way turned over into their brain. At some point, maybe disappears where there is no conscience. I don't know. But in the heart, even Paul talks about in chapter 2, verse 15. Even the Gentiles that don't follow God still know God. They still, in other words, God still lives in us regardless of whether we follow him or not. Does that make sense to everybody? He's our creator. We've got his DNA in us somehow. So now it's our choice. Do we accept him or reject him? And when you don't accept him and you reject him, you still got his DNA in you. So there's still consciousness in you that you know right from wrong. Doesn't mean you follow it. You know it. Okay? In Romans chapter 2, verses 17 through 24, the Jews and the Gentiles, you call yourself a Jew, In other words, look at me, I'm a pastor, right? It's about me as opposed to I'm over here and I'm living out my actions. I'm giving the love of God to others. Does that make sense? And I think that's one of the significant differences. Chapter 2, verses 25 through 29. A person is not a Jew who is outwardly expressing sounds. So in other words, Paul is saying, look, you're a Jew by what you say you are, but you're not following God, so you're really not Jewish. All right? A real Jew is going to accept Jesus Christ because it's written in the scriptures. He's prophesied about. Everything that is said is now been foretold, is now actually happening. You still reject him because of you want something. You're not a Jew. In other words, you're not following Christ. You're no longer the chosen people. You're chosen because